It is my privilege to introduce our first speaker of the night, Mick Douglas. He's a certified instructor here at SANS. If you've ever taken a class with him, you know what's up. He's also awesome on Twitter. Follow him on Better Safety Net on Twitter. I share a lot of the same views that he does. He's definitely a little more vocal in some Twitter arguments, but I'm there hitting the like button. But he's awesome. And I just found out he actually likes sports ball, right? So
Oh
some of
yeah.
you know a little bit about football. I
Mhm.
just found out today that he is an Ohio State alumni, so he's a Buckeye. And if you don't follow college football, they're actually doing very well this season. Not like they don't do well normally. So we got to chat a little bit about that early on. And of course, he's done a cajillion things in security. He's just awesome. I'm going to turn it over to him. Um, I think you can take over the share, or I'll just stop my share
Sure. Yeah, I got it.
and break a leg, man.
All right. Well, thank you. So, okay, folks, what we're going to be talking a bit about are microcontrollers, these little devices here. And I got to tell you, I love these things. So, if you know who I am at all, you know that I love hacking, like in all of its forms. But for me, there's something just special about when it bridges into the physical. Um, I really liked phones, messing around with them. You know, modems and war dialing were my jam back in the day. And I still do them. Believe it or not, you still do find modems, but not to the extent. But these embedded systems, endlessly fascinating, really good. And so a little bit about myself before we get started too much. I run my own company, InfoSec Innovations. We're a boutique security company. And the thing that's different about us is that we try to do both offense and defense. A lot of people try to do one versus the other. And to me, that doesn't make a ton of sense, which is why I actually teach a defense class, Security 555, which is all about tuning SIMs, something near and dear to my heart. And I teach 504, which is the incident response, but hacker techniques class, where we introduce you to like using attack tools. So I get to combine those loves on a daily basis. And actually, these devices make for a very good case study in doing things from a purple mindset, blending both offense and defense. So the device I've been waving around in front of the camera is the Adafruit Circuit Playground Express. Now, there's a couple different versions of these, but they're very, very nice. Now, there are different types of hardware hacking platforms, but if you've not ever really played with hardware hacking, I would encourage you to get this. In a few slides, I'm going to share with you everything that you get on this one little board. It's actually very reminiscent of the badges that you would get at hacker cons that have a bajillion functions and features, and how you use it is up to you. Now, there's a lot of tools that might be more appropriate for doing an actual penetration test. I don't know if there would be a good OPSEC reason to have a device like this. Most people are familiar with the Rubber Ducky from Hak5, which I'm a big fan. It's a real easy platform to use. And what you do is you write these scripts, and it's called Ducky script. And it's basically just a series of commands that gets run. And when you plug this Ducky device into a USB port, it's not seen as a USB drive. It's seen as a keyboard that types really, really fast. And so it's, oh, hey, somebody mentioned they got the Elite Field Kit from the Hak5. Nice. That's actually good stuff. I don't get any money for mentioning any of the products that I'm going to be talking about. And so these endorsements are like well earned, in my opinion. Now, I like the Ducky a lot. That said, it's not the only game in town. There are times that you don't want to use a Ducky. for starters, the Ducky is actually kind of a large form factor if you compare it to, say, something like the Teensy. The Teensy was a device that predates the Ducky. It's an Arduino compatible system that you can program and set it in human input device HID. And when either of these devices, either the Teensy or the Rubber Ducky, activate, that HID detonates and does whatever its payload is. Now, normally you have it just write a little attack script, or several years ago it was very popular to do PowerShell download cradles. Now I'm seeing people doing more of actually typing up the entire exploit in the system, because even though these are small form factors, you can put quite a bit of code on here. You plug it in, the exploit code just runs directly from it, and you've got your payload and you're good to go. For those of you who are on the offensive arts, it's actually really nice, because if you're doing a physical engagement, which due to coronavirus, we're probably not going to be doing those for just a little bit, but when they come back, it's fun to have these in your weapons locker, because you're not going to have to rely on any network signatures tripping because you've got your payload with you. The other thing that's nice is there are times that I can't bring devices onto the network due to NAT. I can't do a whole wide variety of things. So having a microcontroller is super, super important. And I see some Ducky fans. I'm a big fan too. Like, I think that I think that they're awesome. I really am a big fan. So now a lot of people, when they hear this, I'm going to go back a slide. When they hear stuff about the Teensy, they're like, well, why would you use this Teensy? Like, what's the advantage? Why isn't a Ducky all you would ever use? And the answer is, well, sometimes you don't have like a normal USB port available. I have used the Teensy. If you go out on YouTube, you'll find at Nauticon. I'm going to put this into the Slack. I did a talk called Poning the POS. And years ago, I did a pen test where we attacked a point of sale system, and I used a Teensy. And the reason I used Teensies is because they were smaller than Duckies. I actually spliced a Teensy device into the USB port of a pin entry device, or a PED. Those are the things you use at like checkouts at all the places. And Duckies, though they're small, are still too big. So this is a real neat thing to have in your weapons locker as another fallback. So some people are asking, have I tried other Hak5 tools? Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I've from way back in the day with the pineapples, bash bunnies. I think that they're all good stuff. Now, I do think that one thing, putting the blue team side onto things, I do wonder if some of the pen testers have ever tried running these tools in a lab with proper detections, because some of the Hak5 defaults are pretty loud, and you should be able to detect them. So one little word of caution about the Hak5 products: they're great, but because they're just off the shelf, they do need to be customized. And if you talk with anybody at Hak5, they would absolutely agree with me on this. Like, I'm not like in any way denigrating them, but yeah, it's good stuff. Very good stuff. So, so when somebody tells me like, hey, this is just a keyboard, like, what can you do? Well, just about anything. In fact, with keyboard shortcuts and that sort of thing, you can do literally almost anything you want to any system. Now, your payloads do have to be operating system specific, which, I hope you've done reconnaissance. That's step one of a properly executed attack. You'll know the host OS and the platform, and you'll be able to make your payloads really sing. So what I want to do is spend a little bit of time talking about this device that I keep on waving around and explain why I'm such a big fan, and also give you a word of caution. So let's dive into this device, okay? The Circuit Playground Express has a slew of different components, okay? And one of the things that's neat is it comes with these NeoPixels. And if you've never played around with the Adafruit NeoPixels, they can be really, really bright. They're fun, they're easy to program, they're awesome. But there's other components on this board too. So you can make advantage of a 3-axis accelerometer. And believe it or not, even though it's a very, very tiny one, you see it right there, right here in the middle. Let me get my pointer. It's right here, the accelerometer component. What's interesting is it's actually shockingly sensitive for the form factor. Some accelerometers are better than others. This one actually does a good job of doing a free fall detection, which not all accelerometers do reliably. This one does a good job of it. And then they've got a temperature sensor that's actually really neat. I've actually used this a little bit at my home for mocking up different projects that I do. I've got a Wi-Fi enabled thermostat. It's not a Nest, it's one of the others. But I like to check the temperature outside and in different points in the house, and I'll feed telemetry to a temperature control system. And while I wouldn't use this as like my main, this device would be a little bit overkill for my main sensor, it does make for really good and quick mock-ups. It also has a light sensor, which is really fun to play with because you can just cover the little sensor there and you'll get a reading of how light or dark it is. And you can make logical code off of this. This photo transistor, this one's actually one of my favorites to play with when it comes to doing these sorts of HID type attacks, because you can do conditional logics of, hey, when it's dark, I don't want you to do anything, but when it's light, I then want a clock to count down and then activate. It also has a microphone. Now, it's not the greatest, but you can actually detect like sound levels and things like that. It also has a speaker, which I'll demonstrate very, very slightly. And then it's got this slide switch, which for those of you who are going down this route for pen testing, this slide switch is really, really nice when it comes to HID devices. And one of the things that I like doing is making advantage of these so that like in position A, the payload is this, but if I slide the slider to a different position, the payload is a different one. So like you can have a Mac payload and then a Windows payload or whatever. So that way, that slide switch is like your best friend when it comes to doing this stuff. When it comes to doing debug with this platform, I really like the 2 push buttons. You actually can make these push buttons be the trigger event that causes the pre-programmed strings to be sent as keyboard, which is great. Normally when you're doing Teensys or other elements that, like some of the smaller microcontrollers, they don't have the buttons, so you'd either need to wire one up or just make it have a single payload. With these, you can have different payloads, which that's nice. And the thing that's the coolest about these, if I haven't sold you on these yet, it's the price. You get this for about 25 bucks. I love it. And I got to tell you, like, I don't know where you live in the world, but where I'm at, it's going to start getting cold, and I'm not going to be able to go outside and do the stuff that I love doing outside. Every winter, I always come up with a tech thing to do and a non-tech thing to do to just keep me occupied during the long nights. And this year, I am going to revisit microelectronics. Every year I try to shift it up a little bit, but these things are really just lovely to play with. Now, one thing that I do have to caution you is while these are lovely, they do have a problem. And that problem is they're not indestructible. This I will fully own. This is not a problem of the product. This was complete operator error. Prior to this talk, I was messing around with the payloads that I was going to do. And I was a little overly excited, and I yanked the system out while it was still flashing. Now, they will tell you that it won't break. And you know what? It won't. Apparently, I've done that one too many times. One too many times, because watch what happens when I go into boot mode. Right there, red lights. I should, let's see. Yeah, red. I should be getting green. So this one's bricked. But I'll share with you what's going on. Oh, and no, what happens? So great question, Mike. Thank you for the question. Was it a corruption? So there's just a little bit of memory that you write to, and if you detach at just the wrong time, the bootloader gets kind of messed up. And so, what I'm going to do, there's a very tedious process to reflash the bootloader, but because I only did that with like about 10 minutes to go before the lecture, I wasn't about to start doing that, because then I'd like be like, hey, my name's Mick Douglas and I hate computers. Like freak out. So I guess the thing that I want to tell you is these are powerful devices. These are great devices. Pay attention to that. It's okay to remove the device now, because I detached it and they're like, oh, it wasn't ready. And I was like, yeah, whatever. And then I was like, no, it really wasn't ready. So it matters when it matters. Usually it doesn't. So learn from my mistakes, folks. So one item that is awesome about not just the Adafruit Circuit Playground Express, but most Adafruit products is they have like this choose your own adventure theme to them, meaning you get to choose the level of difficulty. And I got to tell you, these things are actually really freaking cool. Microsoft Make Code is a web application. And the way it works is you actually launch a web app. Here, let me get this over so that you guys can see this. I don't know if you've ever played with this, but what you do is you just start a new project and you then move around blocks based off of what system you want. And so you can start playing around, like, let's make these, like this side is going to go green, or I'm sorry, that's a blue. And then this side, we can make it be yellow. Then you attach another block to this, and then you can go, and literally it's just what this would do then is if you would make it have a loop condition. And so this would just flash back and forth. Now you would want to have a little bit of a delay But see, there you go. It's showing you how this works. And folks, that's not any kind of tricks. That's not any kind of like demo shenanigans that Mick's doing. It literally is this easy. So for those of you who have young ones in your life, or folks that, you know, are just wanting to start playing around with these sorts of things, this is the coolest, easiest entry. It really is. And the things that you can do are actually pretty complex and fun. But if that were it, okay, that'd be great. But I got to tell you, there's a Python editor called Moo that I find absolutely fascinating. So here, let me start Moo. And as proof that my Adafruit device is pretty hard bricked, it says it can't find it. That was my sign that it was it was having a rough day. Now, I realize that there are some purists that will give me crap for using Python Moo because it is a relatively low cost of entry. It's a very easy platform to use. But you know what? Ain't no shame in my game because it works and it works well. Let me show you a script here. Here we go. Okay. So here's a script that you would be able to run, assuming this device is attached. What you would do is you would click this serial, and if your device isn't bricked, it would attach just fine. And then you would be able to go. The advantage, I have to say, of why I like Moo over, say, Arduino IDE, super easy to configure. You just set your mode and you say, hey, I want to use the Circuit Python. You hit OK, done. It's literally that easy. Once you're happy with it, you then check it, compile it, send it to your device, and changing what you are writing is literally as simple as changing that string. And note that you have the option of choosing your buttons. For this particular device, there's 2 buttons. You actually, though, can take advantage of the selector switch and make a case of, is it in position 1 or position 2? And if so, the buttons can have different meanings. So this form factor is a little weird. Like, I wouldn't expect to be able to plug this in like surreptitiously on like a red team engagement. Like, hey, hold on, I got to do this blinky light thing. But it does work really, really well if you have the opportunity to take advantage of this. I'm just a real big fan. And if I'm making it sound like it's too easy, it is. I mean, this, like, folks in Slack, like, what are your takes on like the duckies or these sorts of microcontroller attacks? Like, this stuff really is fall out the chair easy. I don't understand why a lot of people don't do it. Like, I'll be honest, I'm just a big fan of playing with these things. Now, you can play around with the Arduino IDE if you want. Hey, Shu, yeah. So for those of you who don't know, Shu, hey buddy. So I'll be talking about some common mistakes that you run into, and I have done that. That's a rite of passage, that you send your own keystrokes into your own environment. Here's one that I'm really embarrassed about is, so one time I was using a Teensy device that I was splicing inside a keyboard. Now, those who know me well know that, well, there's rumors that I have a keyboard addiction problem, and that's not true. I can stop at any time. I Send help. But one time I was weaponizing a keyboard by injecting I removed the back plane, put a Teensy, spliced it in there, and I forgot about it. I was going to use it for a ruse with a client, and I forgot about it. And it just so happened to be the same make and model of another keyboard that I wanted to use. So I attacked myself. And it was really weird because I got a notification from my command and control box out in DigitalOcean. And I was like, oh, that's weird. I wasn't expecting any shells back. And so then I log into the system and I'm like, what? That looks an awful lot like oh, it is me. Took me a minute. Wow. Learn from my mistakes. Okay. Now, setting up Moo is literally as easy as setting mode, and this is the trickiest bit with Moo. When you run it the first time, it will set the mode. If you're doing different projects, you may need to periodically change the mode. But that's the main mistake that most people run into. And then once that's done, you update the circuit bootloader. Now, a little, because I'm going to be embarking on this journey, and you'll follow me on Twitter, and you'll see me complaining about this. Wednesday is when I'll have time to start messing with this. What you'll find is that sometimes the bootloaders are pretty easy to get into. You just press the reset button and hold it for a moment and they begin. Sometimes they need like a fairly specific double tap or maybe even another tap sequence. So it's best to just kind of have a moment of Zen, relax, and then try to enter the bootloader. And then get coding. And there's plenty of stuff out there on GitHub. The sample code that I was posting, that's actually one of the examples that ship with Moo. So I guess what I'm trying to say is you got no excuses. The devices are cheap. The code is easy to get up and going. It's very functional. So it's a great way to start going. Now, I got to tell you, it really is this easy. And one of the things that's a bit weird, and a lot of folks don't think about this or are aware of this, is that when you do a HID attack, it is different than a mass storage device. And that bit is very, very important. Many of my clients skew to the little more exotic on the security side of things. And that's great. They will disable USB storage devices, but not HIDs, because people need to plug in keyboards and mice. A HID attack likely will be able to bypass detections. So, great question. Besides turning lights on and off, what can this be used to control? Well, you can do with this one, you can do a ton. What we're talking about is having this emulate a keyboard. But you can have this basically as like the brain of just about any sort of project. One of the more interesting projects that I saw recently was somebody had one of these flush mounted against their front door. And when a friend would come over to the front door and knock in a particular sequence, remember this has a microphone, it would detect the knocking. And if it was knocked in the correct sequence, it would send a notice to the Bluetooth door lock and slide the deadbolt back, letting the friend open because they knew the secret knock. So yeah, this can be like, a sensor for the home control system. Absolutely. It's perfect for that. Now, if you're going to be doing a lot of little, things, this might not be like, this would get a little expensive. You can buy smaller end systems that are a little bit less expensive. The only thing that this doesn't have, and I understand why it doesn't, because it's kind of expensive to do them, is it doesn't have a hydro sensor. Like I would love to have a version of this that could detect water or humidity levels, just for like gardening, like maybe your basement's too damp, but yeah, this is great stuff. Yep, add a breadboard and you're good to go. One of the things that's really lovely about this is, if you look, these pads are very nice and big. The Adafruit actually has a variety of clips that work really well with this form factor. The other thing that I think is just smashing about these is that these sensor pads also work as touch sensors. So you can play around with those too. So here's a demo that I did playing around with this. So a question, is Moo a Python IDE? Yeah, Moo is just it's like a wrapper. It's basically like a easy to use front end. Like some people find doing Python at the command line a little intimidating. I like it just because I'm lazy, rather than having to get out of my editor and tell it to run. I've just got the button to go. So here was a demo that I did a while back, just to show that you can have a fairly long, oh yeah, PyCharm, nice, like it. Yeah, that's a good one. Here you see a string that's being sent, and I deliberately chose a fairly long one because I want you to understand that you can have these be fairly lengthy. And, the days of Cradle download attacks are probably over. Maybe you'll get lucky from time to time and be able to do them. Usually you're going to have to type your exploit. But this bit's important. You see this right here? Somehow, some way, the P and the R got dropped on that particular entry. Don't know. So just as humans have typos, I guess the computers can too. Part of the reason that I like to mention this is that you really do need to test and have different types of checks, especially those of us who are going to be using these as part of an attack assessment. And so to that end, like I like to do things like pinging myself or somehow interacting with a system that's remote, and that way I can test and make sure that my physical implant worked correctly. Oh, Alan, I'm sorry. Somehow I didn't see this question. Can these replace expensive Ecobee temperature sensors? Maybe. So the protocols that these speak are a little limited compared to the Ecobee. Now, if you're using the Ecobee plugged in, this is a strong contender because you can do the serial over USB, and that's good. However, that said, like everything in life, you get what you pay for. I will say that the more expensive temperature and humidity sensors tend to do much more accurate readings. But for most people, like they just want to know plus or minus a couple degrees, like, is it freaking hot inside or is it cold inside? I would not use one of these devices in a situation like if I had like a highly temperature sensitive medicine that needed to stay within a fairly narrow window. This wouldn't be the product to use. So yeah, thank you for that question. Now, this gets into what Shoemaker was saying. So there's some cautions. If you do virtualization a lot, and I do, most of the time that I'm working, I'm actually on like a tablet or like just a terminal connected into servers in the basement. I can't stress enough that you do not want to go this route if you can avoid it. The way the serial over USB appears to work through virtualization is really, really janky. And I have tried the different hypervisors. I've tried Hyper-V, I've tried VirtualBox, I've tried QEMU, I've tried VMware. They all have let me down. It's tough to get these working under the best of circumstances. Well, let me backtrack that. For Windows 10 and Mac OS, most of the main commercial products that you can get at like a Micro Center or on like the Adafruit site are just going to work, and they work really easily until you have a problem. Maybe there's some software that installed a different version. That is really, really problematic. So Windows sandboxing, would I use a sandbox? I would not. Like honestly, what I'll do is I will defang the attack. So I'll make it like print but not execute, and then I make the final change, because I've been burned one too many times by trying to do this in a VM. Just don't do it. Now, some of you, like me, have a love for defensive stuff too. And so you want to say like, hey, how can we detect these things? The good news is they're actually really, really easy to detect. And here's why. If you look in your system, you have certain human input devices already. And just like baseline this. I mean, it literally is this easy. And one of the things that makes me just confused is that certain environments are exceedingly vulnerable to these types of attacks. I mean, I would not do this without a letter of authorization because I don't want to go to jail. But every time I fly, I look at the back of those TSA computers and I'm like, I have a thing that goes into that right there. And those sorts of things should be monitored. You should be able to detect this. This is something that you need to be mindful of. And I have worked cases where attackers have done this. Now, to be fair, I've been doing this a long time, and I've only dealt with where this was a part of the attack twice. Once, it was part of like a blackmail scheme, basically, where they said, hey, you need to plug in this device, otherwise, we go do whatever. And then the other time is the attacker was at I won't say who, but it was a bank, and they did enough reconnaissance to realize that they could attach one of these devices and have it detonate. And so they did. And yeah, Mike, yes, exactly. 8 seconds of physical access, completely pwned.